fear, honestly, it's an illusion. It is what you make of it in your mind. But once you confront that fear and identify the worst case scenario that would happen, it won't scare you anymore. And you know, I follow this in everything. Whenever, you know, I'm not clear, I'm not going to say I'm scared. If I have a fear of something, I go through the thinking process of what's the worst that could happen out of this. And once you go through the process, you actually take the power away of this fear, and you're able to do it.
Thanks for joining another episode of Talks with T. I'm super honored today to have Raja AlMazrouie with us on the show today. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So you're the managing director of the Etihad Credit Insurance, but I would say you're also one of the four parents of the birth of the, let's call it, ecosystem in fintech. I would say in the UAE, but then also in the region. So I'm super excited to have the conversation with you today.
Thank you, Tara. It's my pleasure to be with you, and it's an amazing experience that I have been through over the last few years, witnessing the birth of the entrepreneurship ecosystem in the region.
What? So you started. You had some sort of affinity towards technology, because I think earlier in your career you started in the IT space. So the first question I would have is, what drew you to be in IT, in tech, from very early in your career?
So I'm a I have tech as my background, and I studied technology long time ago out of curiosity. I was like, okay, nobody wants to do technology. What's going on? So I ventured into it out of curiosity, and luckily I found out that it was an exciting domain to be in. And I've worked in technology roles all my life, and eventually moved into business. But then when the whole fintech industry started to evolve in the region, I thought it was a perfect match for me to move into it, because I've been with the DIFC for the last 12 years. I had the exposure to the financial services sector, but then I got super excited because now it's linked with technology. And I started into fintech from there, and I was able to understand the two languages, the technology and the financial services, and also the language of the two players, whether it's the startups, the entrepreneurs, the regulators, and the financial institutions. So it gave me sort of an interesting position to be able to integrate all of these conversations and support the agenda of fintech, of breaking the barriers, enabling financial inclusion for individuals through technology solutions. That's
amazing. I also I studied computer engineering and software engineering in Canada, and you know, one of the things that became very clear, this is, you know, in the early 2000s, was that it wasn't a very diverse, in terms of gender, it wasn't a very diverse major. And so where do you think that curiosity for you came from, or that desire maybe to go against the standard or the typical movement at the time? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's part of my personality. I studied technology in higher colleges of technology in Abu Dhabi long time ago. And at that time, it was a new major, and all of my friends went into business management and communications, and I wasn't really excited about that because everyone was doing them. And I was excited about technology just because it was new. There was very few people who were willing to, you know, go through this experience. And you know, when something is new, you don't know the outcome.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I decided, you know, if it doesn't work, I can always switch. But then it worked really well.
So you're to a certain extent, you're a risk taker.
I guess so.
Because even kind of looking at your, anybody from the outside looking at your LinkedIn, mashallah, it's clear you've reinvented yourself, your career many, many times. And so where does that courage come from, that desire to, khalas, it's easy to kind of build something and say, I'm comfortable, but it seems like every time you've done that, you've gone and taken on a new challenge.
I'm a passionate learner, and
Okay.
I learn every day, and I get excited about learning new things. And with regards to my career, whenever you achieve something, you always have the option to just be there or reinvent yourself, as you said. I'm driven by impact and creation. So whenever there's an opportunity to create something, I get excited, and then somehow the universe and the stars align for me to be in there. I wouldn't say I have architected that whole career back in the days.
Yeah.
I was just, following my intuition and also looking out for opportunities that, would match my interest. But that passion and curiosity has always led me to those opportunities. And I'm not going to say it has all been rosy and easy.
Akid.
It's been challenging. There were some opportunities that worked really well, some opportunities that didn't work really well. However, I've learned a lot from them. So I take all experiences as learning, and then, don't get stuck there. Just, decide on what's next after.
And, one of the things that is clearly applicable, whether you're building a career or whether you're building a business, is this openness and willingness to follow your instinct and take risk. And so I'd love to kind of get an understanding of how you think about your intuition, how you think about when's the right time to take risk based on your experience.
So I believe, as a person, if you are clear about your objectives, about what you want to achieve, and you just make sure that you're aligned with it. And when I say you're aligned, as in mind, heart, and soul are aligned, you know what you want to do. You're not confused. You're not hesitant. I think that gives you a very clear intuition, because intuition, that's a whole
it's a whole subject.
That's another podcast. But I always say, if you're clear and you're aligned, your intuition will work in your favor. I wouldn't tell you that every time my intuition was right. My intuition is right when I'm clear. When I'm not clear, or I don't have enough information or the right environment to take that decision, then I actually go and seek more information to enable the intuition to drive towards one conclusion or another. But it's really important to be aligned and to be clear on your objectives. What do you want to do? So we always ask the difficult questions. Why? Why does it matter? Why am I doing this? And how long am I going to be doing this?
Yeah. You also mentioned that you're a passionate learner. So how do you go about learning today? What are the things you've done to really continue to maintain that desire to learn and keep yourself moving on that front?
So initially, I thought getting a bachelor's degree or master's degree will get me there, wherever.
Yeah, and then job is done.
Job is done, and obviously it's not. Yeah. But as you grow and as you get into new roles, new technologies, especially in technology, new technologies are being released, new regulations are being issued. You need to be up to date with all of these things, and that learning doesn't only come from university or from getting certified in certain area. It's really having access to the latest news, making sure you are within social network that is relative to the type of work that you do, and doing courses here and there. So I've done so many educational programs throughout my career, but I continue to learn. Like, for example, in my current role in Etihad Credit Insurance, I have been learning about credit insurance for more than a year now, and the only way to do that is by reading books, finding online courses, attending events, learning from experts in the domain itself. Once you realize it's important for you to succeed, you'll definitely go out and seek that. And today with technology, decentralized learning is available to everyone through online courses, through YouTube channels, through subscribing to certain newsletters, and also attending webinars and events. That has been very much easier now compared to having to travel all the way and register and pay all the fees to attend a conference. But now you have access to them, and most of them are also recorded, so you can always go back to those podcast sessions and catch up on points that you've missed before.
Yeah. Fintech is having its own moment right now in our region, but the Fintech Hive started even before any of that was born.
Absolutely. We started in 2017. I still remember the launch, and at that time there were only 2 fintech companies in the DIFC.
Yeah.
And today I lost count. I mean, the numbers are great. They're beyond 500, 600, 700 startups. And in the DIFC in particular, because it's financial services. So really to be able to cater to this number of startups to come, get a license, have the courage to challenge the status quo and play in the blind spots of other institutions was, great for the startups to believe in the opportunity, believe in the support system that has been put in place to enable their growth. But it's really all about the ecosystem. How do you start that whole ecosystem? And now looking back, I realized that there were major components that we were able to bring in together to enable this ecosystem. We had access to financial institutions who were supportive, who wanted to know what is going on in fintech. How could they collaborate, learn, connect with those fintechs to expand their customer database, expand their service offerings. And also there was this passionate entrepreneurs that are around the region who were passionate about creating something new, and also looking at all the success stories globally and realizing there is, a major gap in our region for them to be first movers and jumping in, just like Bezat, and to start to experiment. The third thing I would say is also the support that you had. There were so many accelerators running at the same time with a lot of benefits that were put in place to attract the startups to come. And we have created an opportunity to experiment because some of them succeeded and some of them failed. And the ones that failed found a safe space to fail, learn, and pick up again. They had access to funding, they had access to regulation, the regulators were cooperative, they were learning, they were understanding what's going on and looking at best practices globally and recreating those regulations to fit the region and the startups. And on top of all of that, we had all the investors that believed in the opportunity to invest in those startups, to scale them, and also to integrate them with the missing opportunities within the region to create a bigger impact.
And one of the things you mentioned when you were getting ready to jump into the Fintech Hive, you said that you spoke to a lot of your friends and they said, what if it doesn't work? I get a sense that that's not the first time you've heard what if it doesn't work, and I get a sense that whenever you hear that you get excited
because you don't know unless you get there, right? And once you're there, you realize and that yes, it's going to be great, but then it fails for one small thing that you haven't looked at, or you go in a bit hesitant, but you grow at your own pace. And this is what I saw with most of the startups. Start 2 co-founders, very limited access to funding, experimenting, working with the ecosystem enablers, working with the regulators, working with the venture capital community to test the opportunity for those solutions. And since I was there from the very beginning, like I don't stop talking about Sarwa because I was working really, really closely with them. They did that literally step by step. And the exit was really easy. And, if it didn't work, you could have exited because even the DIFC give access to licensing, co-working space. So you wouldn't put a huge investment to start that journey. It was a small investment. It was okay to fail, but the opportunity was too huge for you to actually consider failure as an option. So the entrepreneurs started to figure out and learn along the way to create something that fits the region. And so there's kind of 2 points here. Number one is startups having not having the fear of failure and just saying, okay, khalas, I'm going to start. But then also, if I kind of bear that to your career, it doesn't seem like you've had this fear of failure in a career because you've, like I said, whenever someone says, what if it doesn't work? You're like, I won't know if I don't try. And so on the topic of failure, in Arab, in general, in our part of the world,
it's very different than Silicon Valley or in the West, where failure is viewed as a learning opportunity. You know, I remember for early parts of Bayzat, whenever I thought, oh my God, this might not work, on some level, there would be some like shame, or I'd worry about how my friends or society would like, you know, thought it tried and didn't work, you know, and I think to a certain extent as Arabs in this part of the world, that's still ingrained in us. So I guess for entrepreneurs listening, or people who want to take a jump in life, who have that voice in their head about failure, and what have you done to silence the voice, for the lack of a better word?
So I'll tell you the real story behind this. I was once having dinner with my best friend in her house, and her husband walked in. He was coming from the gym, and he was wearing a T-shirt. Obviously, before having dinner, I've had all my thoughts and doubts about fear and what others would say, and how would this be seen. And so it's always been in my mind. But that day he walked in, and on his T-shirt was written, "Fear is an illusion." And I was looking at his T-shirt and just thinking and analyzing that statement, fear is an illusion. And we had a conversation about that. And honestly, that conversation has changed my perspective on fear, because fear, honestly, it's an illusion. It is what you make of it in your mind. But once you confront that fear and identify the worst case scenario that would happen, it won't scare you anymore. And you know, I follow this in everything. Whenever, you know, I'm not clear, I'm not going to say I'm scared. If I have a fear of something, I go through the thinking process of what's the worst that could happen out of this. And once you go through the process, you actually take the power away of this fear, and you're able to do it.
Amazing.
So that's the real story. And if you think of it this way, you really take the power out of that fear that would stop you from achieving your goals.
I think most of the time people overweight or overestimate the impact of the downside risk. So like you said, what's the worst case scenario? When you get to that point, you're like, well, if that's the worst that can happen, but on the other side, this is the best thing that could happen, and you weigh them equally, then you realize that clearly that the upside far outweighs the downside. And I think as humans, we're programmed in general to avoid discomfort and avoid risk, versus being programmed to see the opportunity of how big this could be. And so I love what you said, that fear is an illusion, pulls you out of that framework of, oh, what if this happens, what if that happens? And it's subhanallah, it was a perfect moment, it sounds like, to see that T-shirt.
I still remember. Enlightening moment.
And so I can imagine one of the challenges setting up something like the Fintech Hive would be challenging the status quo, right? Because at that point, to a large extent, the DIFC was established. It was the leading financial center in the region, one of the top leading financial centers in the world. So there wasn't necessarily a need to change in that moment. And so I'd love to learn a little bit more about some of the things you had to overcome in challenging the status quo, how you went about doing it.
So as you said, DIFC was leading the whole region in terms of being the financial center. Who's who of financial services companies are in the DIFC. We didn't have enough real estate to accommodate the number of companies that wanted to come and register. And it was a super regulated environment. And for the DIFC to consider also the technology, the innovation, and the entrepreneurship, it's a completely different segment of, I would say, community to be part of the DIFC. But we experimented. As I said, the Fintech Hive, when was launched at the beginning, it was launched as an initiative. It was an initiative. Let's test the market. Let's see how many startups come in, and how does the financial institutions engage with those startups. So for the first program, to our surprise, we received 100 applications. And we didn't think we would reach.
Yeah.
We were asking our partners, well, how many do you think we should get? And they said, if you get 30 to 40, it's great. Because, again, that was 2017. The whole ecosystem was not there. And it was very early to really judge. So when we received 100, we were like really impressed, and we saw the 100 mainly coming from abroad, because they saw the whole Middle East, North Africa region as an opportunity that lacks the whole fintech solutions to tap in. And we started working with those entrepreneurs. We brought them in. We started building a pipeline. Everyone is asking, when is the next accelerator program? And honestly, the licensing structure, the regulatory structure, the number of VCs, the number of ecosystem players started to grow gradually over the years because of the success stories that we were able to communicate. The first cohort had 11 startups, and those 11 attracted so many more. And the second accelerator, I think, we received 300 applications. The third one, we received 600. So we started doubling the numbers in terms of applications, and then we had to also double the number of programs. So we started with one program a year. It was in person. It was in Dubai. And the founders had to be there personally. And then after 3 years, COVID hit. We figured the only way to continue to do this is to do a virtual program. At the beginning, we focused on mentorship, where we matched the financial institutions with some of the startups to understand each other's challenges and the opportunities to overcome them, and also to educate the financial services sector about the opportunity that fintech brings into the table. But really, 3 years through the program, we realized everyone is accelerated. They know fintech. They are comfortable. Their environments are open. Their innovation labs are open to integrate with fintechs and experiment with the solutions. We took the mentorship out, and we shifted into innovation sprints instead of accelerators.
Okay.
So we managed to do 2 programs a year to increase the number of startups that could join the program. And there was a lot of activities that were happening on the side. One of them was Accelerator, which is a female talent accelerator program. At that time, we realized there were not enough women in fintech. All the startups that are applying are mainly male founders. And then we realized there's a gap. How do we address that gap? We launched that talent accelerator side by side with the innovation sprints and the accelerator program. Got those women from financial services or from technology companies to join the program, understand the licensing, understand the regulation, understand the technology, match them with mentors from the industry, and help them be part of that whole sector. And by the time I left, I think we've accelerated more than 100 women in the program, which was great.
That's amazing, mashallah. One of the things that I can imagine a lot of focus was around how do you brand, how do you market the Fintech Hive. And so I'd love to learn a little bit more what you've learned about how to brand a new idea, how to market a new idea, to drive the right acceptance from the audience.
So when we launched the Fintech Hive, we realized we're talking to completely different segment. We're talking to startups, and the DIFC had a corporate brand that did fit the financial institutions and spoke their language. So with the Fintech Hive, we realized we need not a completely different, but a little bit adjusted tone of voice, brand image, and brand collaterals to attract them. So the unicorn was driving that whole thing, because every startup wants to exit as a unicorn. So we've embedded that unicorn. We started playing with colors, and we brought a different image that really connected and resonated with the startups. And we always tapped into the DIFC's brand equity to connect the financial institutions, the regulators, the more kind of structured, regulated, formal players of the ecosystem.
And then even in terms of your let's call it your personal brand, I've noticed, I've been following your content for a long time before I had the pleasure of sitting with you today. I'd love to transition that discussion around brand and so forth to personal brand and content creation. What drives you to create content on a personal level? How do you think about personal brand and the impact that has on whether it's a person's career or even entrepreneurs?
So eventually I realized that it's important as I moved on from tech to marketing and communications. I realized that, and especially with everything digital, the first place people will go to get to know you is really Google. So they will Google you and they will say, okay, she's, spoken here or spoken there, and these are her views, and they will sort of connect with you. So your digital presence is as important as your in-person presence, because if not more, because it's available to a wider range of audience. And given that I have my tech background, always been passionate about digital, so and honestly, if I tell you, maybe 10 years ago, I was not very comfortable with public speaking, with networking, with meetings. So I thought doing content online is easier and safer for me, because I can post my thoughts and then connect with the audience online, and and that gave me the confidence, because I started to see the engagement from the community, and I started to see that they were liking, commenting, engaging with the content, and wanting to know more, especially during the time of the Fintech Hive, because the entrepreneurs are, as I mentioned, are global, and they want to know what type of activities are happening. And in the Fintech Hive, we really had a lot of community events. So we had speakers, we had roundtables, we had pitches, demos, you name it. And everyone was curious about what's going on. So we were constantly posting about the activities. And realizing that whole engagement made me also realize the importance of being consistent and being authentic and as close as to reality to the audience online, because eventually you get to meet them. And it all started from there. But really the engagement is driving me to continue creating the content. And also with creating content, two things happen: awareness and inspiration. So awareness, you are able to share what's going on and how it's affecting certain community with the world, to get them to be part of that community. And then when I talk about the inspiration, it's about sharing your personal experiences with others, so that most of the time they relate to it, but they've never had the chance to hear someone talk about it, and it will inspire them to take that next step, or to confront their own limitations, to grow out of whatever situation they are.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's an area that I'm personally trying to develop. I think I like the consistency, which I think, to your point, is a critical part of developing your digital presence. So you've seen a lot of startups in your time. What have you seen differentiates those that make it or get to, let's call it, the first milestone or second milestone, versus those that don't?
So you can always tell from the beginning if this founder believes in his idea. And if he believes in it, he will be very passionate, very committed, and he will defend it. He will listen to other points of views. He will pivot within the same type of work that he's doing, because he believes in it. Sometimes you see some founders who have been approached through someone else, got an idea from someone, was asked to be part of it. So they don't have the same belief and passion that you see from those. And the ones with the who believes the most are the most successful ones, because they will make it work, whether it's working with a regulator, whether it's raising funding, whether it's talking to whoever it takes to move the agenda, because it was really new and it was really the beginning. And for startups to go from 0 to 1, they had a lot of challenges, but the consistency of continuing to asking questions, reaching out for advice, reaching out for mentorship, reaching out for connections. The ones that invest the time and energy to get there are the ones who've eventually made it. And I always have certain questions that I ask in the beginning to just gauge that passion. And one more important thing is, if they cannot tell you how the technology is solving the problem or how their solution is solving the problem in like 3 minutes, they're not going to make it. And, I have this conversation over and over again, not only for me to understand, but also for them to be able to communicate it in the right way. So I challenge them all the time, not because I don't like them, but it's really when you push them, you see how they can grow out of that comfort area. And I rather that I challenge them than them being challenged on the, next step or so forth.
So what are some of the questions you ask?
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
What is it? What is the one single problem that you're solving for the world through this application? It could be solving one person's problem, or it could be solving 1,000 people's problem. And what do you want out of this? Do you want to create a company that you manage and a team? Do you want to create impact in the world? How are you creating that impact? And trying to make them ask those tough questions to themselves. And then sometimes throughout their journey, they go through issues, whether they want to, it's not working anymore, either pivot the technology or close down the system, figure out what they want to do next. And I also ask those questions. Do you think your credibility is on the line because you've raised money, you've hired people, and now you're saying this is not going to work? And they said, yes, actually, because at least I return some of the investment back to the investors rather than continuing to burn the funds, knowing that this technology doesn't work. So it's always those challenging and difficult questions that help them as well understand how committed they are to their to the solutions. Because especially with startups, they start on their own, they bootstrap, but then they go to the community and start fundraising. And once you start raising, then you're not only raising funds, you're raising expectations, you're raising credibility, you're raising responsibility, because these people trust you. And that trust element is the most important thing, because you don't want to lose it. You can lose the technology, but you don't want to lose that trust, because it's a reflection of the relationship. So, yeah.
And to a certain extent, you raise a really good point, which is, when you raise money, you're not just raising money, you're raising all these other things. And, one thing that I've seen entrepreneurs more open to talk about in the past year than before is the impact that has on stress levels, mental health. And so I guess I'd love to get your perspective on what you've seen. Entrepreneurs you either admire, or the best entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call it, who've done really well at managing stress, managing anxiety, managing that the pressure that comes from that increased credibility and expectations. What have you either done on a personal level or even seen other people do that's really helped them manage that?
So I think it's really important to be transparent with the team. Entrepreneurs start as 2 co-founders, and then they grow into 20, 50, 100 people company. And whoever they recruit believe in their vision. And that's why they take the chance to be part of that journey. And if that journey is going through issues or turbulence, inform the team. Let them be aware of the whole journey, because you pitch that journey to them from the beginning. And if you involve them and you're transparent in your communications with them, you'll be able to get their support, depend on them, get their feedback on how to get out of those issues. I have heard of startups hiring so many people, then laying off so many people. It's not right. When you go through growth stage, go steadily. Don't go and hire so many people, because as a startup, you don't have that corporate culture that's embedded in the DNA of the company. You are building that as you go, and you grow as you recruit. So if you recruit for exponential growth, you should be ready for it by building the right HR system, the right people's culture, and the right mindset, and keeping that communications continuously and transparently within the startup, you'll be able to identify those issues before they happen and avoid all of those consequences. But things happen, you know, pandemic happened during this whole journey. And, you know, valuations dropped and plans changed for everyone. Yeah. And when you go through these, I think it's important to talk about it. And you talk about it with your peers, with your leadership, or even with your friends. Seek guidance, soundboard, don't assume. Because as a person, whether you're the leader or an employee, once you start assuming certain scenarios, they might be right, they might be wrong, but it's your assumption. It has nothing to do with reality. Go cross-check. Find out, because if you allow this assumption to develop and grow, then it will, you know, open your imagination to whatever consequences that might be, and that will affect your mental health and stability much more than reality.
100%. And you know, if I think about Bayzat last year, it was probably one of the toughest years for us on a personal level as founders, and then even as a business, because for multiple reasons, the fundraising kept getting delayed. And, you know, we played around a lot with the idea. Do we tell the team? At that point, we were like 200 something, like 250, 260 team members. Do we talk to the team? Do we not talk to the team? How much do we share? How much do we not share? And my learning experience from that was when we were very open about here's what's happening, and like to 260 people in different countries, and we didn't lose anyone. Like, people rallied behind us, because like you said, they joined because they believed in the vision, and they said, this is a hiccup, it's a road bump, we'll get through it. And like, I had never, you know, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, because I had never seen the team come together to face the adversity like I did that year. And so I completely agree with you. And sometimes in our head we make it bigger, because we say if we tell people, they're going to freak out. But بالعكس, yani, the complete opposite happened.
They appreciate your honesty and also involving them in that conversation, and then that's where the support comes in from.
I think we have to wrap up here, because I promised your assistant we'd finish on time. So I heard you say a couple of things on the conversation today. I heard you say, you know, intuition when you have a clear objective is actually a guiding force. I love this idea of fear is an illusion. This idea of digital presence is as important as your in-person presence. I really like the way you phrased that. You put it very succinctly and very concise, that founders who truly believe they can make it are the ones who do. And then just being transparent with the team, because you owe it to them since they joined because of your vision, regardless of what's happening, is critical to be a good founder. So thank you very much for your time. I've had a lot of fun talking to you, but also just getting to know beyond your digital presence, getting to know you in person.
Thank you so much, Tara, for having me. It's my pleasure to join you today, and I hope the audience enjoy the episode as much as we enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.